Hey everyone, what's going on? Thanks for tuning in to episode 5 of my video build log of the Maxford USA Hughes H-1 racer. I'm DJ Moose, and again, thanks for tuning in. If you look over my shoulder, you can see that the plane is finally starting to take shape and starting to look like a real Hughes H-1. In this episode, we're going to talk about 3 main things. We're going to zoom into the tail and show the installation of the fairings, the top and bottom fairings. And if you remember from the first episode, I was a little leery about that. I wasn't sure how that was going to look. But I think it came out pretty good, and I'll show you what I did. And I'll show you one major drawback that you can never really tell in the pictures now that I know. It's not that big of a deal, but we'll talk about it. Second, we'll talk about the canopy hatch and putting the cockpit window on. That's really a straightforward process, but I found a cool way to use magnets to get that on really nice and secure, so got some pictures and we'll zoom in on that too. Then we're going to talk about starting to mount the cowl and gluing that sliding motor mount to get everything lined up right. And unfortunately, I'm going to walk you through some of a major problem I found with the cowl, and I think it was just mine. I think it was a manufacturing defect. So let me just say again, thanks for tuning in. We've probably got about 2 more episodes left. The next episode is going to be finally gluing that sliding motor mount, and then all of the interior wiring, mounting the ESC, mounting the batteries, basically everything, all the final touches needed. And then finally, we're going to close out with kind of like an overall encompassing review of the plane. Everything that I've learned through the building process, what I'd do differently if I built this plane again. And unfortunately, it's November and it snowed here today, so I don't think I'm going to be able to fly this until spring. So I apologize, but you'll have to hang out, and I've got a lot more builds to video over the winter, and so it's not gonna be boring around here. But I promise you, obviously, if I fly it, I will get some video and tell you how I think about it. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and zoom into the tail and start talking about those fairings. All right, guys, here's the Hughes H-1, and you know what? Hey, this is my workbench, so got some stuff all around, so I apologize if it's not that tidy. But here is the Hughes H-1 as it stands now, and we'll go down. And let's first talk about these fairings on the top and the bottom. And if you remember, I kind of wasn't so sure how they'd turn out, but they actually don't look too bad. And in the manual, there's a little bag of machine screws that you can use to mount those, but it says they actually recommend using some tape, some clear glossy tape, and that's what I did. And I don't know, I can see this through my camera right now, and I think it looks pretty good. So I don't know, you zoom in, you can kind of see the tape where the really shiny spots are, etc. And I used 1 servo screw on each side. Also right there at the bottom of the rudder, you have to cut out a little spot so the rudder doesn't hit. So that's not that big of a deal. There's really no way to make that look any better than that. So here's the one bad thing. In all of the pictures, you don't really get to see the tail, and they really don't have a solution to make this back end look any better than that. And there's basically the bottom part and then the 2 top pieces on each side, and that's how the back is going to look. And let's see if we can get a better view of that. That's about all you can do. And so that's what it's going to look like unless you kind of covered that up with some more plastic, etc. So again, it's not a museum piece. Let's just see how it flies. But standing far away, it looks the part, and pretty darn good, I'd say. And we can go into the bottom. There's that fairing on the bottom, and same thing with some tape. And then after you put that on, you can put the tail wheel on. Nothing really too fancy there. If we zoom into the tail wheel, you can see that I found a bushing that kind of helped it stay in place a little bit. There, it's focused. And that's actually a standard servo screw bushing that comes with the servo. I had one left over, and it fits that wire really nicely, and it just worked really well on the tail wheel. So let's move up to the canopy. And basically all you have is that plastic canopy and you have to glue it on. I used, we'll go down here, this E6000 glue, and that worked really well. And honestly, all I did was, here's a picture. I used some really high strength magnets to kind of keep it in place. I glued the front part on first, and then the back part on. So basically took 2 days. I just let each half kind of dry for a full day, but it's on there really nice. If you can see, I wanted to have it overlap a little bit. So, and I didn't really glue the top rear portion on because there's a really small piece of balsa for the canopy there. So here's a potential problem. There's a little gap here on both sides. As much as I tried to form that as much as I couldn't form it perfectly. So maybe, you know, one or two things are going to happen. There's going to be, maybe that's a, you know, air exit hole for some heat. If we get this thing going really fast, I can see that causing some vibration and making a little noise, and who knows, maybe they'll make a cool whistle or something. Who knows, but we'll see. But something to pay attention to. But the key thing is I wanted it to overlap, so there was a nice overlap from this seam right here. All right, let's move over to the cowl, and you know, it looks really nice on here. Obviously I don't have the propeller. That's a 9.9 right there, or 9.5, and it's not fully mounted yet, but it's on there just because I'm trying to find that gap and to just measure that gap perfectly. So here's a picture of what this looked like at the beginning. All right, so here's with the cowl off, and the problem was that that mounting ring was not mounted straight. And so it took me a while to realize that, but what I did was took a ruler and measured around and saw that they didn't mount this straight. And you know, I'm sure that's not easy to do, to make sure that's perfectly straight, but you can see on, I think it's, not sure where it is, but there's a good, you know, a couple millimeters more depth on one side, and that's causing that misalignment. Because if you look at the motor box, there's no, you know, at first I thought it was a thrust angle issue, and there's actually no thrust built in. Everything is perfectly square. I'm like, okay, well then if that's perfectly square, the cowl should be perfectly straight, and you know, it's not. And I took some measurements and got some rulers out and found that it's not. So, and I figured there was a number of things that could happen. You know, they could not cut this opening straight. The dummy engine is glued in there. That could not be straight. And then most importantly, this mounting bracket, if that's not perfectly straight, then the whole thing is going to be off. And unfortunately, that's the case. So what I ended up doing was just added a little spacer to the mount holes. And the cool thing about this cowl is that it fits on over those holes and rotates, and a magnet kind of keeps it in place. So I just added a little washer there to add some spacing from that side, and that's actually a bushing from a high-tech servo, and the spacing is perfect and everything is spot on straight now. So, but again, here's what the Hughes H-1 looks like now, and it'll look even better with the wings on in our next episode. So come back and see what the insides look like with the motor mounted, the ESC mounted, and maybe we'll even start up the motor. So until next time, we'll catch you guys later.